Alright guys, in the previous video I spoke about South Korea's pending population collapse, and in that video I discovered that there's a gender imbalance in the population. While doing so, I discovered conclusive proof that doctors had been breaking the law for about 20 years, and the proof comes in the statistics. But then after doing more research, I discovered that this unlawfulness is actually pretty academic, and you're gonna find out why later, because the laws and how the laws are enforced in South Korea is totally messed up. So let's have a look and see what's going on. So this graph shows the population right now in 2022. It's about 51.3 million. Now before that there was a huge population explosion from about 1950 up until about the present time. And now you can see that the population has peaked. So right now we're seeing the peak of South Korea's population, and the population is just going to decrease. So check out the video I made previously about how this is going to be an absolute disaster. But for this video I want to talk about the gender imbalance between males and females. So here is South Korea's population pyramid for 2022, and if you just look over here for a second, you will see that the median age for males is 40.2 and for females is 43.4. So men on average are younger than women. So let's have a look at these age groups and see what's going on. So people under the age of 1, we can see here that males outnumber females, and there's about 9,000 more males age 0 than females. This gender imbalance goes all the way up to about the age of 58. So at around age 58, there's almost an identical amount of males to females. But everyone under this age, there is an imbalance of males to females where there are more males than females. And this imbalance just gets larger and larger when you go down to younger ages. Now I have another 2 population pyramid graphs to show you which show this imbalance, the surplus of males to females. So let's just have a look at 30-year-olds. We can see 365,000 males and 318,000 females. So this graph here actually shows you the surplus. So in the darker blue, you can see the surplus of males to females. And if you look at the older ages, so from about 70 or even 60 onwards, you can see that there's a surplus of females. So you can see the darker pink here showing you the excess, the surplus of females to males. But then when you go to 60 and younger, you can see that there's a surplus of males. And you can see here, men in their 20s, there's a huge surplus of males in their 20s. So what's going on here? So this article here helps explain what's going on, how South Korea stopped its parents aborting girls. So because there's a surplus of males, it obviously means that there's more abortions happening of unborn females than males, and the government tried to do something about this imbalance. So 1 daughter is equal to 10 sons was the message desperately being promoted by the South Korean government. So at one stage the ratio was 116.5 boys for every 100 girls at its peak. So this was back in, I think it was the 80s. They were seen to carry on the family line, provide financial support, and take care of their parents in old age. So this is why they prefer males to females, because of all these factors. So this has been going on for centuries in Korean tradition. So in 1988, the South Korean government enacted a law making it illegal for a doctor to reveal the gender of a fetus to expectant parents. So this was to stop parents aborting unborn females, and they were hoping that abortion rates would go down among girls so that there would be a better balance of males to females in the country. So let's have a look at this graph here. Now this graph unfortunately is a little outdated. It's from 2010, but it does show you what happened in this time period, and also it has this really cool extra bit of information. So in purple you see the sex ratio of females to males, and you can see like for people like in their 70s and 80s, there's a huge discrepancy. Way more females than males living like till their 80s and 90s. But if you go down to younger people, you can see that changes to the surplus being for males. And you can see in 1990, it was almost at 120. So here at the bottom of the graph, you can see in purple the numbers. So you can see here that it was almost at 120 males to females. So this is like just after they enacted this law in 1988, because this ratio was getting completely out of control. Because like in the 1970s, so 1975, it was almost the same for newborns. So here we can see, like, for example, in 1970, the ratio of males to females being born was about 50-50. And then it just skews dramatically for males. From the 1970s onwards, families were deciding that men were far more valuable than women, and look what happened. But then the government, they came in and they said that daughters are more important than sons and so on. And this actually did improve the situation. You can see in the 1990s, the ratio getting closer and closer. And because of this, they actually got rid of this law. So let's have a look here. South Korea ends ban on babies' gender information. South Korea instituted a ban on physicians telling couples the gender of their unborn child. A Korean court overturned that ban Thursday, saying the practice is no longer a problem. So this is 2008, 20 years after the ban was enforced, and it says the nation has moved past the traditional culture preference for sons. The court also pointed to statistics showing the gender ratio in South Korea has returned to the normal male-female ratio nations without the sex selection abortion phenomenon normally see. So that refers to this purple line here. We can see how the ratios get more and more even throughout the 90s and in the early 2000s, and therefore they decided this law was no longer necessary because abortions of unborn females started to decline from the 1990s. The current ban calls for a 3-year prison term and fines, but the court said the law should be amended to allow doctors to share the sex of the baby in the later half of pregnancy. While this ban was in place, they came up with inventive ways to get around the ban. They often tell prospective parents their baby is cute or energetic to reveal the sex. Now, I would assume that cute would mean it's a girl and energetic would mean it's a boy. Provide baby toys that are pink or blue, or give away pieces of candy indicative of the gender of the baby. So they were telling them in a roundabout way to try and get around the law. This is like blatant corruption right here. This is blatant. I mean, if a doctor is giving you a pink toy, then they're essentially telling you it's going to be a girl. Or if it's a blue toy, it's going to be a boy. So this law was kind of difficult to enforce. Doctors found easy ways to get around it. But nevertheless, here is your proof right here that doctors broke this law in insane numbers. Look at that huge surplus of males. That means that there's this many females getting aborted. So with this huge population increase happening for the second half of the 20th century, the South Korean government had a bunch of measures to try and curb this. So one would assume that they legalized abortion. Abortion has been legalized in so many other developed countries. But in actual fact, abortion was decriminalized only in 2021, just last year. And this was by a 2019 order of the Constitutional Court of Korea. So right up until 2021, abortion was actually illegal. So what the hell is going on here? From 1953 through to 2020, abortion was illegal in most circumstances, but illegal abortions were widespread and commonly performed at hospitals and clinics. So even though abortion was illegal, it was carried out and they didn't clamp down on it. The government of South Korea criminalized abortion in the 1953 Criminal Code in all circumstances. But the abortion law was not strongly enforced, especially during campaigns to lower South Korea's high fertility rate in the 1970s and 1980s. So here we can see in the 70s and 80s, the population was getting out of control. So the government essentially turned a blind eye to the fact that abortions were being carried out because they wanted to control the population. So my reading of it is that abortions were still not that common, but that when it did occur, they turned a blind eye to it because they were desperate to control this population here in the 60s, 70s and 80s. And so any woman who wanted an abortion, the doctors would do it without fear of repercussions. So despite a 1987 revision of the medical code prohibiting physicians from using prenatal testing to reveal the sex of the child, the ratio of boys to girls at birth continued to climb through the 1990s. So that sentence is technically not accurate, but it is true that the ratio of boys to girls was still in favor of the boys, meaning that in all these surpluses, the gender was revealed. Otherwise, you would have a 50-50 split between males and females. So even though it did decrease by quite a bit, we still had gender reveals happening. And this is your proof right there from this graph. So in 1973, they changed the law to allow abortion under certain circumstances. So we had 5 circumstances here, rape and genetic disorders, and if the life of the mother was in danger from giving birth. So, and a couple of other reasons. But still, under the vast majority of circumstances, abortion was still illegal even after 1973. But take a look at this. Using a 2005 survey of 25 hospitals and 176 private clinics, one study estimated that over 340,000 induced abortions were performed that year in South Korea, and 330 of them were illegal. So the vast majority of abortions were illegal, and that makes sense because there are only a limited amount of circumstances where abortion is allowed. So this would imply an abortion rate of 29.8 abortions per 1,000 women, so just under 30, aged between 15 and 44. So to put that another way, basically 3 out of every 100 women aged between 15 and 44 had an abortion around the year 2005. That's a staggering number. That's a crazy amount, especially given the fact that abortion at this stage is still illegal, apart from those few circumstances. So other researchers found that there may be as many as 500,000 or 1 million abortions a year. Crazy. Now, there's more estimates here that's saying it may have declined to about 50,000 in 2017. That kind of makes sense. Even though that's a huge drop from 500,000 to 50,000, a tenfold drop, that does kind of make sense because the population is just naturally declining. And you have like birth control now as well, birth control pills and stuff as well. So abortion is kind of like a last resort for a lot of women because a lot of them will be on the pill now. This is a scary number. 500,000 to 1 million abortions a year in the mid 2000s. That's a crazy number. And that's why this whole business of the surplus males and being banned from telling parents the gender, it doesn't matter because all abortions, or at least the vast majority of them, were illegal from the 1950s. From 1953 all the way up until last year, all but a small percentage of abortions were illegal. So this whole not being allowed to reveal the gender was just really a moot point. It didn't matter because huge amounts of abortions are being carried out anyway. So there you go, guys. A messed up situation in South Korea. Abortion was illegal until last year, but the rates of abortion have been absolutely crazy over the last 50 odd years. But now it's legal, and I think just the fact that it's now completely legal, I think this graph is actually going to get worse. The decline and the collapse is going to be even greater than this. So there you go, guys. Be sure to subscribe. I'm going to be doing lots of videos about populations in various countries. I've done a few already with tons more to come. So leave a comment. Let me know what you think about population decrease across the world. Let me know what you think about abortion. That's highly controversial, of course. So until next time, see you guys later.